It is time for our first talk of day 2. We're going to kick off by looking at the sound of Phantom Abyss. Composer and sound designer Cedar Jones will be taking us through the creation of sound and an enormously procedurally generated world, including an adaptive and generative music system.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Oh, we're working straight away. That's great. So thank you so much for joining me for this talk on the sound of Phantom Abyss. My name's Cedar Jones. As Rad said, I'm the composer and sound designer for the project. I've also got my Brittany mic on, which is quite a novelty for me. So if I start sort of pacing and gesticulating and stuff, obviously I'm just pretending I'm a motivational speaker. So bear with me, I'll get tired soon enough. 40 minutes, obviously it's not a lot of time to talk, and there's so much that I want to go through with this project. So I'll just sort of talk at you like a bit of a whirlwind for a little bit, and hopefully we'll get through a lot of things though. Uh-oh. Clicky, clicky. Good start, isn't it? I think I need to turn it on. Thank you very much. Oh, there we go. Okay, well, we're partway through. Yep, so a little bit about me then first. I think we've probably used up all the time we have for that. I've been an audio lead, a composer and a sound designer at various points throughout my career in different roles at different companies. I started at Chrome Studios about 16 or 17 years ago, working with a great audio team there that I learnt a lot from. Moved on from Chrome Studios to Halfbrick. I was at Halfbrick for about 12 years, 8 of which were as the audio lead, managing a really super talented audio team. And then quite recently, I've moved on from Halfbrick to the eccentric Ape, T for short. I think the mic's cutting a little. Okay, we'll see. Is it cutting in and out for you guys? I might be hitting the mute button. That's muted. Okay, we're back again. No. Yeah. No, I'm not hitting anything yet. I'm about to hit it. What was that, sorry? Okay. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to hit the big button. Let's see what happens. Oh, nothing happened. Hey! No. I mean, I get confused with tech sometimes, but it's literally a button. I'm not sure. Sorry, you push it. I'm actually really glad it didn't work then. I can talk about the last bit on that slide. So Phantom Abyss, for me, was a sort of part-time passion project, I guess. So I got to work on that by the good graces of Halfbrick, who I was working for at the time, in-house. They were good enough to let me work on that as a kind of freelance side hustle thing, which was really, really cool, and I'm very appreciative of that. Also, previously on that slide, there was a bit there about how I kind of have been lucky to work on a little bit of everything throughout my career because of the different projects and the different companies and things. I've got to do music, sound design, implementation, VO, music licensing, so forth. I'll just talk really loud. Yeah, and so all that's contributed to a very kind of fulfilling career. I'm sort of maxed out on that slide now. I will read this out to you. So Phantom Abyss, stolen from Steam, is a massive asynchronous multiplayer game that casts players into procedurally generated temples and tasks them with retrieving the sacred relics hidden within deadly chambers. You reckon we're good? Yeah. Thanks very much. Okay. Now also stolen from Steam is a little bit of the trailer. So I'm going to ask them at the back if they can please play the trailer, and I'll just give you a little taste. There's audio for it though. No luck, guys. We'll take it in turns to get up and improv. That was. Oh, no. Spoilers. We can do this for 40 minutes, right? We probably don't need the audio for the trailer so much. It's just to give people a bit of a feel for what the game's like. So I'm happy to go on if you guys want to keep troubleshooting whatever's happening. Yep, okay, so I'll move on to the next slide. So, as the sound designer, when I spoke to the team about this project, we have a brief at the start where we talk about everything. And so there's a few things that kind of stick out to us, right? You hear something from the team and go, oh, okay, that's an important consideration that we need to talk about and think about. So I had 6 of them for this project. I'll go through them now. Some of those are going to form the basis of the content of this talk. So first of all, it has procedurally generated levels. And this means we need to really think about how we're going to handle the ambience in the game. It basically needs to be flexible and it needs to be future-proof. Because if the team go and add more rooms to the game, you don't know where that room's going to go in. It could be added at any time. The audio needs to handle that gracefully. It also has phantoms in it. So the phantoms are basically ghosts of players that have gone before you and have died. And so we need this feeling of sort of empathy and connection with the phantoms, because they're real people that have actually played the game before you, and you're sort of watching their run through the game. They can also be kind of helpful because they will sort of trigger traps and things. They'll help show you the way through the temple and everything if you stick with them. So we wanted them to sound really, really cool and sound different to the player as well, but not in a kind of real world, visceral, physical kind of way that's going to confuse the player and take them out of the game and think that they need to be paying more attention to these phantoms than they actually need to. So we needed to find a way to make them sound cool but not detract from the game. And it also has traps, of course, and the traps try to kill you. So they're pretty important. And I just knew with the procedurally generated nature of the game that sometimes the traps would be like one little set of spikes, and sometimes it'd be 100 sets of spikes going like 1,000,000 miles an hour and just spamming the sound. So that was something that we really had to focus on, making sure that the audio could adapt to the different sizes, widths, configurations, amounts, etc., of all these different permutations of how the traps might end up in the game. So sadly, we've only got so much time. I've chosen to talk about the ambience, environmental stuff, and the phantoms. Not going to talk further about the traps, but other than to say, like TLDR, I guess, we use a lot of wise RTPCs to control the volume or to control exactly which samples play for these traps, depending on the size and layout and so on. So 3 more considerations. It has these temple guardians. They're like big godlike deity kind of figures that come in and you awaken them and anger them and they come and chase you and try to kill you. So they're pretty important and they're also pretty powerful. So it was very important with these things to make the audio really kind of, it was a little bit of sort of feature audio, right? We wanted to tell the story that they're big and powerful and cool, and also that they're pretty dangerous. And there were some important moments where we wanted to use the audio to really cue to the player, okay, something's there, it's got this dangerous attack, it's going to kill you pretty quick if you don't pay attention. So the audio kind of had a little bit of a gameplay design role to play there as well. We had the whip, which is a core control mechanic. So you're using the whip like a grappling hook. You use it to interact with traps and to open up treasure chests and things like that. So the player's using the whip a lot. We knew it needed to feel sort of visceral and fun to use and to kind of interact with. To kind of give that sense of connection for the player as well. And then lastly, and really this could be its own talk, right? Like with nearly any game, the music. So for this game, we knew that it was going to sort of tell the player how to feel, or maybe suggest to the player how they should feel. And we wanted to use the music to sort of enhance the game, but not detract from the important moments in the game as well. I think music can be a really easy, blunt instrument to go in and use and to overuse it and end up kind of detracting from the experience. The other thing with the music is it needed to be dynamic and reactive and so on. I won't talk about that much now because that's later in the talk. So, chosen to talk about the Temple Guardians and the music in this one. The whip, another day or something. But did you know, says the Devouring Rage Guardian, the whip, or most of the whip sounds were custom recorded. And you can see there in also adherence to the strictest of safety protocols with my fancy footwear. Yep. So that goes because it's a whip. So, ambience. Okay, so let's move on to talk about the actual ambience and environmental sounds here. So lots of considerations with the ambience. There are many, many rooms in the game, and we don't know exactly how all the permutations are going to come out, so we don't know the exact layout of the temples and things. There are also different environment skins. So some are skins depending on the difficulty level, like a sort of Mayan, Incan, South American kind of cool looking vibe, a little bit Tomb Raidery. Some of them have like a caverns skin, what we called caverns, and it's sort of icy, glacial, kind of super cold stuff. And then thirdly, there's the Inferno skin, which is really hot fire and lava and so on. And so the audio would be the same sound, or the same sound object for all of them, but it needed to switch between all these different skins. Also, when we're at this kind of level, and you know, we probably a lot of us have done this sort of stuff where we add ambient sounds, and you know, we were also adding reverb zones and music triggers and things as well. So at this point, I'm sort of thinking, oh, procedurally generated, how are we going to do these rooms? Is every room going to be like a random size and shape and things? I'm thinking that sounds pretty complex. We're going to have to sort of figure out like a volume that you know, it procedurally figures out the volume, and then we play an ambisonic sound inside there or something. Went down that path a little bit, but no, thankfully, it turned out that the rooms are, at that more granular level, all the rooms are set. So it means that we can sort of go through, custom sort of bake in all of the ambience and just place, you know, sound props, reverb, music triggers and stuff on a per room basis, which was easy to do as well because every room, although it might have the different environment skins and could be sort of randomly turn up anywhere in the level, it always has the same function. So it might be active traps, for example, or it might be a hidden room with hidden traps, and so the player's really tense. It might be a corridor, it might be a shrine room, or whatever else. So the way we did this was wanting to keep a lot of the complexity and wires for the ambience. So we had one big sound container. All of the you know, functionality inside that container was handled in wires, so that on the Unreal side of things, where I'm not particularly good, all we had to do was basically place that AK ambient sound. And obviously Wise is very good at handling that sort of thing because being middleware, it does it better than Unreal, right? So we kept it all in that one big sound container, and that also kind of made it future-proof, because if I wanted to change the ambience, I just had to go in and change that sound in Wise, and I didn't have to go in and update 10,000 of these little rooms. So what did it actually look like? I've got a bit of a tree diagram here. So ambient room, medium, hidden, LP. It's a medium-sized hidden room. It's the looping sound for it, or the looping sound object, I guess. So that's a switch container in Wise, and then inside that switch we have 3 different blend containers, each one representing one of those environment skins. So the ruins, the caverns, and the inferno. If we look inside the ruins, we have 2 random containers, one with looping sound variations to kind of provide the glue, if you like, and also a container full of one-shot sounds. These one-shot sounds, and so inside the looping, inside that we have the random variations that will be randomly chosen to play. Inside the one-shot container, we break it down further into all of the one-shot types of sounds, and that's where we sort of differentiate a lot between these different environment skins. So it might be something like groans, knocks, screams, waterphone type sounds, lava gurgles, screaming metal groans, cries, whatever you want to call it. All of these different sounds, and we kind of use these ones for this skin, these ones for that skin, and so on. We also change the looping sounds as well. And so, yeah, each of those is then further broken down into all of its random variations as well. And so these groans, knocks, etc. will trigger continuously, but in a random order and with a random trigger rate. And furthermore, we had 3D automation on the emitter position. So for the player, you're getting a random sound triggering at a random time, at a random volume and pitch from a random 3D location around you. And so that's the way that we kind of made it a little bit, feeling like the world's alive, I guess. That's just how it looks in Wise. That's the container, I guess, with all the info in it. Can't really expand it all. It wouldn't fit on the screen, obviously, but because there's a lot of variations in there, but it's that kind of thing. Okay, so I've just got an example here. This is the cavern skin, so it's really icy. You can see that's just a static image, but yeah, if you wouldn't mind playing the ambient sound down the back. Okay. Yeah, cool. Okay. We're just going to restart PowerPoint. It's going to take one moment. But then we might have audio back, and that'd be pretty good. So.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Now's when I need my motivational speaker skills, isn't it? How are we doing? High score! No, just kidding. Let's not. High five the person next to you. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. So, thank you so much. The whip. So we break it down into a whole bunch of individual sounds. We think, okay, so you have obviously the Foley when you go to whip it. We have a mechanical release sound. We have a whoosh release sound as well. Then we have the actual sound of the whip out in space, the whip cracking, and then a retract sound for when the whip comes back in. And so each of those moments is kind of important for the player to have that kind of distinction between them all. And so by breaking it down that way, we could also make it sound a little bit different each time you whipped, because it also gave us lots of different random variations that we could use. There are also a whole bunch of different whip skins, like a fire whip, an ice whip, lightning whip, etc. And so we used a switch container to have some elements of the whip, like the mechanical elements, would stay the same, so it always felt like you were using the whip. But then for the whoosh sound, for example, we'd have, like the fire elements and stuff like that. And that was the way we kind of skinned each whip to go with the visuals.
A lot of control in Wise, you have all these different things ready to be combined into one whip sound, random ones?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And so you pick the random variations down at the most granular level. Yep. Yeah. Thank you for the suggestion to talk about the whip.
If anyone has, If anyone has any other questions that they want to jump in with while we're trying to sort out these technical issues, please just go ahead. Or if you're online, put them in Slido and I'll see them. There's one there.
The whip was just a Sony PCM M10, because that's what I had on me. I was up in Mullaney visiting family, and somebody happened to have a whip there. So, which makes a great story. The reality is actually a little bit more boring.
I feel like that raises more questions than it answers.
We've only got time for so many questions. Yes, I had the M10 on me. So you use what you have on you, right? So had it like propped up against a tree branch on the ground and had to record it in this like rainforest valley, and it had this awesome sound in the valley, but there were also heaps of birds and rainforest type sounds. So we ended up combining that with another sound where I went out and sort of like cracking it in a field where there weren't really other sounds, but the recording was really, really underwhelming because you weren't hearing the sound bounce back towards you. So I kind of took the cleanness and like the attack transient from that one and some of the more reverberant stuff from in the rainforest. Yeah. No, I have special, highly expensive thongs that I wear, that I like to wear when recording. Any other questions while we're... Or are we back, guys? Yeah, okay, so any other questions at all? Yeah.
Regarding the ambient sound, would you have recorded it?
Mainly recordings. I think almost all the ambient sounds would have been recordings. Definitely some library recordings and definitely some custom ones. So the custom stuff, I remember, for example, like a jetty in Canada. There was this really... Hey! Yeah. Physical sounds, yeah, for the most part. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Awesome. That's the, yeah, so that's the caverns. We'll kick on. So that's the caverns. Now, if we look at the same room, but with a different skin, ooh, clickety click. Uh-oh. Okay, cool. So same room, different skin, same sound, but a switch container. So now, if you could please play that sound, it's now all of the cavern variations of the sound. Okay, so we're hearing the looping sounds, and we're also hearing a bunch of one shots. If you're in the game and actually moving the listener position around, you kind of obviously appreciate the 3D nature of it. And you probably heard in there a bit of a gurgly sound. That's because there is lava in the game. There we are. Yep, so there's lava in the game. We have all of these water volumes with standard water sounds and waterfalls and things. About partway through the project, the team's like, oh yeah, the water is now sometimes lava. So we get out our handy switch container, and I guess this is a great thing about middleware and things. We just use a switch container, switch the state to the liquid state to lava instead of water. And really, I just talk about that because I wanted to show some photos of some custom recording. So this one was with a different mic. This was a Sennheiser MKH8050. And yeah, I show it there because I love recording water, and like custom recording is where so much of the joy of this job is, I think, sometimes. Especially for me, just recording water sounds is awesome. I did not record the lava, but wouldn't it be awesome too one day? Okay, did you know, says the Eye of Agony, another Guardian. The Ice Whip used recordings from crinkling up a broken car windscreen very carefully with gloves and things. But yeah, crinkling it up gave that ice sound. So there's just a little tidbit. Okay, so now we're going to move on. There was actually another one there, but it was just... Yep, we're going to talk about Guardians now. So, the Devouring Rage. Anybody that's played the game will probably be familiar with this particular Guardian. Everything about this one is based on distance, essentially. So the player's just going about their level, and this Guardian just slowly but surely and menacingly just creeps up on you, and you can't do anything about it. So you have to get through the level quicker than the Guardian can catch you, basically. And it kind of makes things pretty terrifying. And so because it was all based on distance, we wanted to make the audio tied into the distance of the Guardian to the listener, to the player. And so we used RTPCs for the music, and we used a blend container for the sound effects, which we can hopefully demonstrate. I did click it, I promise. Okay, so here we have the looping sound for the Devouring Rage. If you guys wouldn't mind playing that at the back, hopefully it works. No audio. Okay. Yep. Okay. So so you can normally hear the more intense audio layer fading up here as that blue indicator comes in. So that blue indicator is representing the proximity to the player, and the sound would become less low pass filtered, and it would also fade in a more intense sound. It's unfortunate we can't hear that one. Okay, so again, a video here with the music for the Devouring Rage, showing the 3 different voices for close, medium and far distance to the player. And then we use RTPCs to crossfade the music, depending, again, on his distance to the player. Can we try playing that one and cross fingers? No. No good. Okay. The layers. Oh, in these ones, yeah. So for when the Guardian's far from the player, we wanted it just to be more sort of like a more cue for the player, just so the player knows that there's this brooding kind of music, and you go, oh yeah, that's right, the Guardian's active at the moment. And then when it's a medium distance from the player, we want to know, well, okay, the Guardian's closer now. I'm starting to feel a little bit, a little bit intense. And then up close, it's kind of like an immediate kind of prompt for the player. Oh crap, okay, it's right next to me now. Yeah, so audio-wise, it's just like, much more intense drums, reversed piano kind of sounds and so on for the intense layer. And then like more just sort of bass guitar and sort of gentle ambient percussion for when it's far away. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, sort of. Not really deliberately, but just in the music layers, I tended to make the further away one a little bit more ambient sounding, and there were some more up close, super dry elements in the close one. It was baked in. Yeah, the reverb itself was. Yeah, I didn't really have any like worldizing on the music as such. All of that was just baked into the music tracks. Yeah. Are we going to try to play this one, or shall I just press on? We're playing? Okay, so we're far away here. You can see by the RTPCs, the further one is playing. Now as I move this, we get closer. We get really close, you hear more urgency in the music. And then we get far away. And then get close again. Yeah, so as it gets closer there, you get that panicky kind of feel. Okay, and now just to really test out how the video's going, we have another one. This is in-game, just to quickly see how that Guardian actually functions in-game. 1 minute, yep. No, we didn't end up changing the music for the other Guardians. This is the only one that actually gets a music change, so it's a bit special in that way, I guess. We did change the music for one of the other Guardians, but it came in and out of the level all the time, and so it kept changing the music like that was kind of a bit abrupt feeling for the player, and it kept, kind of taking you out of that experience a little bit too much. So we ended up leaving the music the same and making it more of a sound design kind of choice for the others. Yeah. So you hear it fade down there, back to a medium layer. And soon you'll hear it fade right up as I get a bit too close. And then by the end here, you hear it sort of come back down to a medium sort of far. Okay, so we'll go on to the next Guardian now. This one's called the Masked Defiler, which I don't like that name at all, so I'm going to call it the Grenade Guardian. And the Grenade Guardian it's all about, by the name, avoiding grenades, right? So it drops these grenades, they explode into steam or gas or something that really hurts and damages the player. And it needed to feel heavy and cool because it's a big, powerful Guardian. And also it was so important for the player to be able to tell when one of these grenades has landed next to them, right? Because from a gameplay point of view, you really need to know that. So we did the cliche thing, and cliches exist for a reason because they work well. When the player's in the smoke, we take the environment bus and we put a low-pass filter, pitch it down, apply some effects and things like that. So the player has that cue that, okay, I'm in the smoke, I need to get back out again. Another video here. Oh, so many things. Yeah, lots of library stuff, like I don't have typos and stuff. Thank you guys at the back, nice job. I appreciate whatever you're doing to make things work. Okay. And so, yeah, quick little glimpse there. And did you know, says the devouring rage again, the fearsome roars when I awaken were made by these two little cuties. So, yeah, obviously with some effects and processing from their not at all biased father. Aren't they fearsome? They actually are at 3 a.m. when they wake up. You know? Okay. Getting a lot of screen time. Do I click it again? Okay, cool. So now we'll go on to talk about the phantoms. And so what are the phantoms? Basically, they're the ghosts of players that have been through the level before you, have died in the attempt. Because of this, there can be such a variable number of them. So there might be none, there might be one or two, or there could be dozens or even hundreds potentially. So the audio really needed to, kind of needed to be there, but you don't want big heavy footsteps for 100 phantoms all going through the level. You're going to feel like you're playing Call of Duty or something, right? So we really needed to kind of prioritize accordingly and think about how we're going to handle the audio for these phantoms and make it sound really different to the player and not a physical sort of sound in the world, but a much more ethereal sound. So the obvious thing, so the question was how to make them sound cool, but not sort of get in the way and detract from the experience for the player. So the obvious thing was to start with looping sounds. The way that they look, they've got this cool, really nice blue kind of ethereal look on them. So we started with a bunch of looping sounds. I've just got 4 examples here, if you wouldn't mind playing them. So a lot of wispy wind and whispers and vocoding them together, mixing up the carrier and the modulator and all that sort of stuff. Fun sounds to make. You'd think maybe that they might match well, but it didn't really work too well. And we found that it felt way too static when we attached those sounds to the phantoms, because the phantoms will sort of stop and they'll start. You think about somebody playing the game, they're normally completely still looking around, or they're walking, or let's be honest, they're holding shift and sprinting all the time, right? And so there's kind of those 3 speeds. So at least we can add an RTPC to make the sound react to those different speeds that the player might be going, or if they're like using the grappling hook, the whip, to like move through the air quickly and things. So we added the RTPC, which controls volume and pitch based on the phantom speed. It sounded really jerky though, because it was kind of start or stop. The good thing about how they look and how the sounds were was that it really lent itself to adding reverb. And what we could do was add sort of a creative use of reverb later in the signal chain after the RTPC does its work. Then it goes down to the auxiliary bus, and the auxiliary bus adds the reverb, and that kind of worked to glue it all together a lot and get rid of a lot of that stuttery, janky kind of sound. And it's worth mentioning that we did also duplicate a lot of the player animation sounds, footsteps and stuff, so we did have them in there for the phantoms, but it was a lot lower in the mix, and it also went through the same auxiliary bus, so it kind of felt much more ethereal and kind of tied it with the looping sounds as well. So we've got an example video here, if you wouldn't mind playing it. This just shows the ghost sounds for the RTPC simulating ghost speed. Yeah, so you get a bit more of a feeling of them actually moving around you then. And we now have a little example in-game as well. There we are. If you guys wouldn't mind playing that. Right. So another quick, did you know the rock footstep sounds were recorded on top of Mount Tibrogargan on the Sunshine Coast? In my infinite wisdom, I thought it would be really quiet up there. It turns out there's like a direct line of sight to the Bruce Highway, which is a highway, And so all those sounds just came straight up and completely ruined some of the recordings. When I figured out what was happening, it was a bit easier to kind of walk down the other side of the mountain a bit, and it turns out nothing stops sound better than like a 500-metre tall mountain. And so those ones were a lot better, so we ended up using a lot of those ones. Okay, let's get into the music. So, man, I would love to, I'd talk your ear off about the music in this if I could, just because, you know, it's kind of half the audio in a game normally, right? But only got so much time. We'll do a bit of a quick little sort of dig into it. So the question was always, like I've said before, how can we make the music really serve the game but without detracting from the experience? In terms of serving the game, we can do things like make it reactive. With all of these traps and the procedural nature of the game, the player's going to be in different levels of danger and different levels of action throughout the game, right? So we can make the music react to that. We can also use looping and also non-looping music. I think it's really important sometimes to have music that doesn't loop because we don't want to hear it just playing all the time. Sometimes it's really nice to have music sort of elegantly finish, and then that leaves room for silence and for the ambience and environmental sounds and things to breathe. And in a game like this, I think that can be quite important. Similarly, when we play a music sting, you know, we want to serve the game without detracting from it. So instead of stopping the music and playing this big kind of in-your-face heroic music sting, if the player finds a secret room or something, obviously we can instead kind of incorporate the sting into the currently playing music so it doesn't kind of yank the player out of whatever mood they were feeling and kind of scream in their face to grab their attention. We also had what we call dark rooms, which are rooms that are dark, obviously. The player grabs a crystal, which kind of works like an ambient light source and makes their way through the room. These rooms, you can go into them or out of them quite quickly. So we wanted the music to be reflective of the fact that they were in a dark room, but we didn't, again, want to stop the music that was currently playing. We also had timer states, so that's an element of time pressure, basically, in the game. So the player might whip a trigger, it might set off a timed sequence where you have 10 seconds to jump across a massive chasm before all the platforms disappear again. So we needed to convey to the player, okay, the clock's ticking. But we didn't want to have a 60 beat per minute clock ticking sound playing havoc with the tempo of the music. So without detracting from it, serving the game without detracting. How do we not detract from it? Ooh. I'll tell you, I know it says silence. Yeah, so silence, really important, right? I think in many games, silence is probably underused. In a game like this, it can really kind of work well to let the player just sort of have a bit of downtime perhaps, and at the same time really accentuate things when the music comes back. So when you give it back to the player, it's kind of all the better for it. We also have generative music, so we break it down to a fairly granular level. So every time it plays, it's playing different random variations and things, and it's a little bit different every time the player hears it. And we make the music timely, so it doesn't stack up. If the player runs through a room full of hidden traps, we want some tense music to play. That tense music is only going to play if it happens to reach a point where the music can elegantly transition to that track within 3 seconds or 5 seconds or whatever. So we put it basically like cancel the pending music trigger after a certain amount of time. And that way we won't retrospectively play this really tense music track for something the player did 30 seconds ago. So quick deep dive here into the music system. We had the menu music, the menu system, which was super straightforward, just a looping menu track and a results screen track. And then we had the in-game system, which was where a lot of the complexity was. So we had a music mood container. We would just call it a mood music system, and that comprised, so that was a big music switch container, which comprised of a whole bunch of different moods. So these moods might be something like awe. So that was sort of a short music sting that we would play to convey a sense of awe when the player begins a level. We might have tension, like I keep saying, for the hidden traps and things. We might have the shrine music, which was a really good opportunity to kind of take all the tension and danger out of the game, because when the player is in a shrine room, they're in total safety. So they can't really hurt themselves in there unless they do something really stupid. And so that was a great opportunity to kind of let the player feel okay just for a little moment. We had the relic room, which was kind of similar, but this time we needed a real sense of, divinity and sacredness and all that sort of stuff because it's got the relic in it. It's the whole aim of the game to reach this room. And then we had the action system. So the action system contains all the most of the guts of this greater system, I guess. It sort of highlights moments of action in the game, and that's where we have the generative and the reactive kind of stuff, which I'll dig into in just a sec. And we also had panic music. So the panic mood had a music track that it wasn't reactive because it was always pretty intense in those panic rooms, but it did have the same sort of generative stuff, so it sounded different every time you heard it. And then we had the end mood. Not really a mood as such, but this was used for when we wanted to end the music gracefully. So if the player is running through a room, it's playing a music track, and then the player runs into a corridor, we don't want to stop the music abruptly. That would detract from the experience, right? Drag them out of things. And we don't want to just keep the music playing because there's no danger anymore. They're in a corridor. The music needs to stop. So it plays through to a custom music cue, custom music marker, and then it will transition to silence by using a transition, which would be normally like a long held note or a cymbal swell or something like that in the same key as the music. So let's zoom in a little bit now into this action subsystem, I guess. So the action mood is a music playlist container, which contains two music segments, part A and part B. Part A had a tonal center of D. I'm sort of not saying key because we're not using much major and minor and stuff. There aren't many like musical thirds in there. So tonal center of D and then tonal center of F for part B. In that way, we can arrange it part A, part B, part A again, which we might really roughly call a ternary music structure. We'll zoom in again to part A, the tonal center of D, which is a music segment. So what's inside there? This is where all of the stuff is, really. So we have the three intensity music layers, 1, 2, and 3, just for different levels of intensity. The game does some magic formula to figure out how many traps are around the player and how dangerous they are and things like that, and turns that into a number between 0 and 1. But depending on that number, we choose which sounds to play within these layers. Within each layer, we have things like beats, melodies, impacts, fills, and rises. And then we break down melodies further again into call and response. And by getting really granular like that, it gives you more possible permutations as you go through and choose all your random variations for each one. In addition to the intensity layers, we have the dark room layer. So these are the rooms that are completely dark. This way, when the player goes into those rooms, we just crossfade to these layers and we're not changing and chopping the music. We're just crossfading smoothly into a much more gloomy, brooding, slow kind of music style. But you still kind of get that sense of momentum and the beat and tempo and stuff keeps going. The dark room layers are further broken down into, what do I call it, pulse and sustain, just to make it a bit more granular to help with that generative nature. And we have the timer layer. So timer will be low, medium, and high. It's basically a clock ticking, but it's in time with the music. So that seemed to work kind of well. It was a lot better than it not being in time with the music, right? So yeah, low, medium, and high for that one. Now we're going to zoom in for the last time into the calls and responses. So this is what it actually looks like at the wise level. You can see here we've got, so this is the highest intensity layer. We've got 7 or 8 calls, and then I can click. Yep, 7 or 8 calls here, 7 or 8 responses here, and each time we randomly choose one. I've set it up so that the response, the second time it plays, will be slightly different, and in that way it feels like a 4-bar musical phrase instead of a 2-bar musical phrase, and it doesn't feel quite as granular as I guess it actually is. So we've got 4 examples here which we can play in a sec, and just to show you, it's just playing 1 bar of each. So 1 bar call, 1 bar response. If you guys wouldn't mind just playing through those. Yeah, so obviously that has beats behind it as well, but you can hear the melodic call and response stuff going on as well. So I've got a video here, you guys can just play it, there's no audio in this one, so I can just talk through it. But this just basically scrolls through what a music segment, what this part A music segment in this case looks like within Wise. If you guys wouldn't mind triggering that one, I can just talk over the top. Yeah, cool. So here we have our intensity layers, impacts, beats, fills, rises, etc. for 3 different intensity layers. Then we get down all the call and response and stuff. Then we get down to the dark room layers, pulses and sustains, and then the timer layers for low, medium, and high. So there's a hell of a lot going on in each individual segment. And then we have up the top there, you can see the RTPC curves changing based on which voice it is and what I want, which voices I want to be playing at different intensity levels for the game. Another video here, it's just simulating this action RTPC, and you can actually hear how it changes the music from, not very intense up to more intense. I'd love to have a long example of this one, but obviously time's of the essence. So we've just got a short example here, if you guys wouldn't mind playing that one. It's an action RTPC, which you can probably see me moving it there. Yep. So low on the left, high on the right. So obviously sort of going from exploration to some action to full-on action. I got to get past this trap before it kills me, and then back down again, and all the tension gets kind of sucked away. So dark rooms. Dark rooms were, the thing with them is that you can enter and exit them very quickly. So what we ended up doing was using those dark room layers with a state group for like darkness. We called it gloom. Gloom was either on or off. So we had a trigger which would which would trigger an event to set the state to either gloom or no gloom. And yeah, really good opportunity here to kind of thin out the music and give the player a bit of a break and have some sparseness in the game. So video here, if you guys can play that, please. You just see that gloom state change from off to on. And then you come out of the gloom room and the percussion comes back in for the exploration mode. Then we go back into the gloom, gets all gloomy. So it feels nice because it's almost pitch black and you're kind of creeping around hearing ambience and things like that. And then lastly, the timer sequences. So these are going to exist within the action rooms, which means that they need to play nicely with that action music, which is playing at the same time. And it really needs to convey that sense of time pressure. Again, it's an important gameplay cue for the player. It's not really trying to sound cool or anything. It's just letting them know, hey, you've got, like, the time's ticking here. And then it kind of ramps up to show that the time's really ticking and it's about to expire. And like I said, we didn't want to do the clock tick. It was going to play havoc with the music. So instead, let's make it just go to the beat of the music. Easy way to do that is to make more layers inside that music system. Last video. Thanks, guys. So no timer, then we go low timer, medium, and then high. And then we take it away when there's no longer time pressure. So maybe the player's made it over to the other side of that chasm and the timer stops. So that way we can incorporate it and we can give the player those cues without actually sort of stopping the music or having to yell it in their face, right? And the Grenade Guardian says, did you know that is the end? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cedar.
Thank you.
I love how that really stressed me out, hearing those timers and stuff, and I think it really goes to show the power that music and sound design can have in a game. We're going to have a couple quick questions for you. Does 3D ambience get resource heavy versus 2D, or is it worth it for the immersion?
I was afraid somebody was going to ask something like that, 'cause I don't really know. It didn't become a problem, let's say that. I think if anything was going to be a problem, it would probably be that music system, loading all of those different variations and things. Triggering off the 3D sounds, no, I don't think so, because if you think about playing a third-person game or something, you've got all these sounds happening anyway. Players are playing footstep sounds and all sorts of weapon sounds and stuff, and that's already getting all computed in 3D. So I think an ambient system that, it sounds, like maybe it sounds complex, but in actual fact, it's maybe like eight sounds playing at different points around the player, and the game does way more than that anyway, normally. So I don't think so. I hope not.
Do you think aspiring sound designers can realistically aim to stay and be hired in Australia, Or should we have to be open to moving interstate/overseas?
All about Phantom Abyss. No, it's a great question though, and I think it's a really sort of timely question. Previously I probably would have said, in all honesty, possibly, but one silver lining to COVID, I would say, is that so many people are going remote now, and in fact, lots of places that I'm working at are remote now, and I know a lot of my friends are the same. So I think these days I would say probably not. I'd say stay in Australia where it's pretty awesome. Yeah, like when I was at Halfbrick, we hired internationally. We'd started really ramping up the hiring of remote employees, and in fact, we all turned remote anyway. So I would say I don't think it's that important anymore.
Also, my vested interest, keep making Australian games, if you can.
Yeah, there is that as well.
How did you go about negotiating the fees for the music when dealing with doing multiple versions of each track and the randomized segments?
Yeah, it got nowhere near that, again, granular, I guess, in terms of talking about fees. I was just doing 10 hours a week. So it was more just an hourly rate, I guess. And to be honest, I had good working relationships with the team. I'd worked with all of them before. We have a good relationship. They knew roughly what they were going to get. I sort of knew, I knew what I was going to give them, what they were going to pay me. Yeah, so we didn't really break it down like that at all. It was more just, I'll do 10 hours a week and I'll see what I can do. If there were times where it felt like I wasn't getting enough done, or if I was having to like crunch and work way more than 10 hours, then we'd kind of have that conversation. But we had the kind of relationship where we didn't sort of need to discuss the finer details like that.
Got one last one for you. What are the main differences of thinking how to approach audio with a desktop/console game versus mobile?
I think maybe it depends more on the type of game than the platform, because the thing with mobile games is a lot of the time your users are going to use headphones anyway. So they're either going to use like the worst possible, like speaker, like this tiny little speaker thing, or they're going to use headphones. And as we all probably know, headphones can be pretty unflattering sometimes, right? So I think on mobile casual, you can't really, or on mobiles, you can't really rely on it just coming through that little speaker, because a little speaker is kind of flattering most of the time, I think. So it's just really important to develop using headphones a lot, or just using speakers. I don't think that I really changed my approach too much. I think more about the type of game and what the end user is going to be, how they're going to be playing the game and how they're going to be experiencing it. And I think that's probably much more important. I'd say there's probably more similarities between a first-person shooter on mobile and on a desktop, than like the other way around, like changing between the mobile and desktop. More similarities between like a first-person shooter on mobile and desktop than between something like a first-person shooter on mobile and, a game like Fruit Ninja or something like that on mobile. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cedar. That was a great presentation, and thank you for dealing with the tech difficulties
No
so
worries.
well.
Thank you, guys. Thanks very much.